Welcome back to the Connor Lewis podcast. I'm your host, Connor Lewis, and I'm joined by Jeff Eisenband, a man who has done so much in his broadcast career. You may see him on TikTok once in a while. I was delving through your TikTok a little bit, and I saw some of your reposts. You were on a trivia show. You were on a couple things, a street trivia show for sports.
Yep. I was on Sports IQ recently.
That's it, yeah.
Yep. I wasn't sure if you were talking, because at one time I did HQ trivia, which might be.
Oh, no, we're going to get there.
Might be
Do
before
not worry.
your time. So, yeah.
No. I remember it well. But, Jeff, first of all, thank you so much for being here. You're a tough man to track down, but I'm glad you were here. We're doing this. I'm really hyped.
I know. And, I apologize for being someone. I'm on the road a little bit right now, which I guess we'll get into, which makes it, I kind of have 2 days a week where I try to focus, and then 5 days where sometimes I'm just off the grid.
I understand, and I got a lot to ask you. And again, I'm gonna jump around a little bit with your career. I kind of want to start towards the beginning and then work our way up. But yeah, I think that's a good place to start. So, at what point in your life did you realize that you had an interest or like a passion for sports broadcasting?
Yeah. Early on, I'd say really for me, I go back to high school. Sophomore year of high school, first day I came into my video production class that year, and there was a sign for, they were looking for students to call play-by-play for high school sporting events, for varsity sports. And at the time, it's kind of one of those things where like you imagine you announce for your friends around a video game, but you never actually do it, and you never think you're going to have those opportunities. And I took on that opportunity, and after I won the homecoming football game, I was like, you know what, this is what I want to do. And so from there, I broadcasted a ton of sports in high school, also anchored the student news, and applied. I wanted to go to Northwestern University for sports journalism, and I didn't really have a backup plan, and luckily everything worked out. But so that's really, the dream has had a lot of different iterations since then, but that is where it all started.
I gotcha. It's kind of interesting because I'm from Rhode Island, and we don't have a whole lot of varsity sport broadcasting. Even now, even when I graduated, I was always trying to get into that. I started doing college, but it's tough to get into. It's a tough industry to get into, and it's cool how far you've made it. And so you go to Northwestern, and what steps were you taking, and what were you doing like outside of the classroom in order to like set yourself up for this career that you've done so much in?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I'd say it was more outside the classroom than inside the classroom. Is kind of what I think I tell people nowadays is, for me, I was lucky enough. I had spent a summer at Northwestern before actually being there, between my junior and senior year of high school. So I'd gotten to know some people, and I got to freelance some places even as early as high school, a site called ThePostGame.com, which was a Yahoo Sports site. So by the time I got to school my freshman year, I wanted to be a part of student media, of course, but I also had some other opportunities that were going on. I was doing some phone interviews. I was doing some sort of remote journalism, I guess you could call it back then. And the biggest thing that happened for me was I got a call January of my freshman year from my editor, a guy named Victor Chi at the time. And he said, "Hey, is there any way you can get to Indianapolis next week?" And I was like, "What?" He said, "The Super Bowl is going to be in Indianapolis." I'm obviously an objective journalist, but he said, "Your New York Giants are playing against Connor. I'm sure your New England Patriots in
I'm not, believe it or not.
Okay, we can get into that. But in Super Bowl 46, if you can get there, we have press passes for you." And I was like, I don't know how to get from Chicago to Indianapolis. I'm a New York kid, but I called my parents. I said, "How can we make this work?" And we found ways. There were short flights from Chicago to Indianapolis, mega buses, and I got there in time for Tuesday Media Day, which is now Super Bowl opening night on Monday night. But back then it was Super Bowl Media Day on Tuesday. Got there, came back to Chicago, came back to Evanston, did my schoolwork, wrote articles during the week, wrote like 10 articles from the sort of experience that I had on Super Bowl Media Day, came back eventually to cover the Super Bowl. Was under the stadium, was there when all the players came to the podium after they had just played the game. The winners, the Giants, the losers, the Patriots, and came back on a megabus 3 a.m. that night, went back to class and kept writing all of Monday. And that was when I kind of just walked away and thought, okay, this is what I want to do. And I have opportunities here that, for my friends that were econ majors, poli-sci majors, there weren't those real world opportunities necessarily in those fields. But for journalism students, there are so many real world experiences that you can get. And I kind of kept that running. As I was in college, I freelanced a handful of other places as well, with the idea that, hey, when I get out of college, I'm already going to have real world experience. I'm essentially going to have entry level experience already done by the time that I get, to age 22, 23.
Not to disrespect your freshman self, but
Please go on.
How were you? Like, I'm trying to wrap my mind around this because I'm thinking about myself a year ago when I was a freshman.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think I would have been prepared for that. How did you get selected for that out of just all the people surrounding you, and how nervous were you? Because I feel like I'd be nervous right now, and I feel like pretty mature.
Convenience, I think it is. We do live in an industry where sometimes if you're the cheapest option or if you're the most successful option, you can solve people's problems. So I was close enough from Chicago to Indianapolis that the travel expenses weren't that much. But I think you're right. I wasn't ready. I didn't know at the time if I was ready or not. But for me, at least, it was a tremendous opportunity to learn. It was a tremendous opportunity to get there and say, okay, now I have to walk up to Victor Cruz. I have to walk up to Matthias Kiwanuka, Matthew Slater. I wasn't exactly interviewing Tom Brady or Eli Manning, but I have to walk up to these guys and, have the confidence to ask them a question and to think about something, think about questions that are going to be unique to what I'm trying to cover. I'm trying to cover things from more of a lifestyle than a news perspective. And also, that'll be different, that'll be unique, that they'll be willing to answer. So, did I ask the best questions then? Did I write the best articles? Probably not. But you have to start somewhere. And I think I was very lucky to have that opportunity. And I think that every time I look back at what the things that I do now, I'll be 33 in May. And I think that do I?
You look no older than 23. You look no older than 23.
I think that's the thing. Sometimes it's good to look young. Sometimes you need to look older. But I think that I look back when I was 27 and I thought I was ready for things that then I go, you weren't ready. You're so much more experienced now. And I'm sure in 5 years, I'll say you weren't ready when you were 32. You're so much more experienced now. So I think that's always going to happen, not just in media, but in any field where you're just going to always be hopefully focused on gaining more experience and just getting better and better.
Gotcha. So correct me if I'm wrong, because I may be off on this. I'm not as experienced as you are. But is podcasting, not to toot my own horn, but is that the evolution of what you were doing then? Or do you think there's still kind of room for what you were doing at that time now?
It's funny, right? I was talking to someone today who talked about being a radio, television, and film major actually at Northwestern. And she was saying, basically now it's podcast, television, and film. Like people, what is radio teaching as much as podcasting, as much as, they're kind of in one now. I think that I was very focused on coming out of school and being in the digital realm. And now I'm in broadcast, but I was very focused. Like I said, I was doing sort of lifestyle media. I was doing essentially magazine media in college while also broadcasting in the extracurriculars. It wasn't exactly, I wish I took more video editing classes and stuff when I was in college, but I was really focused on the digital space so I graduated college in 2015. And I always tell people, like, I think you're graduating college in 2028. And my 2015 journalism education is completely different than someone that graduated in 2019, which is completely different than someone that graduated in 2024. And your education in 2028 is going to be completely different from a perspective of media, not just media. I don't even know if you're a media major or a communications or a journalism major. Whatever your major may be, in media specifically, things change over time. Because when I was in college, I got to college 2011, and the professor said, you need to create a Twitter account. And by 2015, Twitter was a class at Northwestern. So you see things move. It's not like econ where the same supply and demand charts have been used for centuries. Things are always changing. So like podcasting wasn't really a thing when I was in college. It was just starting. Podcasting was just kind of scratching the surface. And then over the last decade, podcasting has blown up. Yes, Bill Simmons had a podcast. Certain individuals had podcasts. But I mean, it was hard to get a podcast to play in your car. Like, this is back when aux cords were the main way to connect your phone to try to get music. There was no Apple CarPlay or anything like that. So it was just a different time. And now I think I think that there's this whole digital space that when I started in 2011, it was newspapers, magazines, TV. And then by the time I was done in 2015, it was, we need to figure out social media. And then by the time 2020 came around, I'm sure it was more about, hey, we need to focus on podcasting. We need to focus on how to, digital breaking news, getting things out as fast as possible, digital interviews, YouTube. That just continues to evolve. So it's kind of, I'm not dancing around the answer as much as it's changing, and it's still going to keep changing.
No, I didn't think you were dancing around the answer. And just for context, I'm a sports management and communications major. So
which fits.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a really good point though. I mean, and even you have adjusted with your TikTok account, which I actually admire. Mm-hmm. I admire what you're doing with that. Just posting kind of that same lifestyle content that you were doing way back then, now just in for your own life back at the PGA and all that. So I think it still applies to today. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this, so I kind of want to move on to your time with the Big Ten Network, and you start doing broadcasting then. Were you still in college at that point?
Yeah, so the Big Ten has an awesome program called BTN Student U, which is essentially the broadcasters for almost any event that's not on TV, that's not on Big Ten Network, anything that's digital is broadcasted by students. And that was an incredibly important opportunity to get to call sports. The highest profile stuff we did probably were kind of non-conference men's basketball, women's basketball games, baseball, soccer. I did a lot of volleyball. So I was bouncing around and getting all these reps in all these sorts of sports. Wrestling was a sport that I had never covered before college, obviously, but I kind of talked to the guys in charge, and I decided that freshman year, I wanted to come shadow the play-by-play broadcaster for wrestling. And then I called wrestling sophomore, junior, and senior year. I learned what that was, some of the terms and some of the, wasn't getting paid to come shadow, but did the extra sort of work to learn a new sport. And I think that that's something still over a decade later, I still want to, I tell people all the time, I want to call the Olympics, and I'd be more than happy to call a sport that I'm not as familiar with and have to learn, for that sport every 4 years, or have to cover the world championships and learn and master. I think that that's, something that's a really cool opportunity. And I think that the Big Ten, lucky for me, provides those opportunities to students.
And do you still think that's something that communication majors like myself should do? Like, it's like go out and try to shadow people that are doing this, because I feel like New England's a little different. Like I feel like and I go to like a smaller college, so we don't have the same type of program, I guess. But do you still think it's like a good idea to still shadow people and just reach out? Because I feel like it might be easier now to reach out to people with LinkedIn and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously some people are more receptive than others, but if you ask the most successful people in the world, they tend to, speaking of media specifically, they tend to shadow other people or try to find mentors out in the space. And I think in any field, finding mentors is incredibly important. Obviously, you need the right people who are willing to help you and see you there and aren't distracted and aren't upset by your presence. But I think that, to see how the top people are at their craft, there's almost no better education that you can get. You can learn everything in school. You can watch documentaries, you can watch videos, you can try to figure it out. But until you see people kind of how the sausage is made, I don't think you necessarily can really get a grasp on how you have to do it. And it's the best part is, right, you're not making mistakes or anything like that. You can see this before you have to learn on the fly. I think that we unfortunately live in a world sometimes where you're graded on how you study for the test, right? When you're in school, and you just kind of, you're not learning to learn as much as learning for what is being asked of you in that arena of, that particular class, that particular test. And I think that what sports broadcasting, what extracurriculars allowed me to do when I was younger was to go after opportunities to learn, to do things, to have those learning experiences without actually being penalized by them. And the fact that I got to do so many of them in the college sphere and not in the real world, ultimately, I can't even begin to fathom how that was a gift to not make mistakes when things were on the line and people's jobs were on the line, as much as to make the mistakes in a much lower scale, and then get better in the real world.
I see what you're saying. I kind of want to ask you about your time as a freelance broadcaster and journalist, because you've covered, like, I looked at your LinkedIn and the list is a mile long. Like, you've covered so many different leagues and worked with so many different companies. Is there any specific league or sport or company that sticks out to you that you've gotten to work with or cover in your career?
Well, I think I have to start with the PGA Tour, because that's where I've kind of found my true calling and niche in terms of broadcasting for the PGA Tour for the last 5-6 years now. I do PGA Tour Live, which is the ESPN Plus streaming broadcast of PGA Tour golf, and PGA Tour Radio, which is on Sirius XM. And now I'm hosting The Drop, certain select episodes, which airs on Golf Channel. And I think the PGA Tour, I just think it's fallen into place for me that I'm very passionate about the game of golf. I'm very passionate about broadcast. I'm very passionate about the growth of the sport, and kind of want to see it expand. And being on that streaming side, being on that new school media side of things, has just afforded me an opportunity to do something that I love, and also hopefully amplify it as well. I would also add, though, the NBA2K League, which is the NBA esports league, was the first league that truly gave me an opportunity to get into broadcast at a high level, at a national level, and allowed me to do everything. I did everything from play-by-play, color commentary, sidelines, studio work. I was doing everything and learning so much. And that's where I wish, again, another thing I thought I was ready for. And I look back and go, man, you were raw. You didn't know all this terminology that producers were sending in your ear. But at the time I felt like, all right, I'm ready. Let's go. And they let me make mistakes and made me get better. And, I'd add MSG was kind of the bridge between NBA 2K League and the PGA Tour, which was a dream to be able to work for MSG Networks in New York, where I grew up watching Knicks and Rangers broadcast my entire life. And, was able to meet some of my idols there and have those experiences from a studio perspective. So those big three, are the biggest places that I've sensed growth. You mentioned I've done a lot of individual broadcasts for MLB, NBA proper, the NHL, HQ Trivia, the DP World Tour, like a lot of different places. But those are the big three where I've really honed my skills.
I have like a bunch of tiny individual questions, but I want to start with the NBA 2K League, because that's the most interesting to me. I feel like I don't know if I could name another esports broadcaster, and that's no disservice to the game, the sport of esport, I guess, but it's just not a very common thing you see. So I'm curious to know how does one get involved in that? Because I just feel like it's so specific and kind of, I hate to say unorthodox, because it feels like I'm being disrespectful, but it's so interesting to me.
Look, some of this stuff, I want to be clear. It's, you make your own luck, right? But I've gotten lucky in terms of I've cast a wide net places that some things have worked and some things haven't. And I've always taken pride in trying to be at the cutting edge of things. What's the new thing? What's going on? Esports, when I came out of college in 2015, esports was growing. I shouldn't say it was massive. It was growing. And a lot of people were like, what's this? How can we fit it in? And I had a lot of people come up to me and were like, you should just become an esports reporter, an esports broadcaster right away, because that's a niche. That's a niche that's untapped. And what I realized right away was, I like playing sports games with my friends, right? I like playing NBA 2K, NHL, Madden. I don't necessarily like playing World of Warcraft, League of Legends, Fortnite. And I think that a lot of people didn't understand that the sports audience and the hardcore gaming audience are very different. And you're not going to get someone who's calling the NBA 2K League shouldn't be calling Overwatch League and vice versa. So I didn't go into esports hard at first, but I was very interested in the gaming world and the sports gaming world. And I was able to work a little bit with the NBA. They were looking for someone to host Twitch content with NBA players, sitting on a couch at the NBA office, playing NBA 2K, taking questions from the chat, and just interviewing NBA players for like an hour or two. And it was the coolest gig you can possibly imagine. I didn't just do it there. I went out to LA. I went out to E3, played video games with some NBA players. I went out to the rookies. Kind of the rookies would have this like private summit every year. We'd go play video games with them. It was just, awesome time, awesome opportunity, awesome experience. So then when the NBA 2K League started and it was kind of down the hall in the NBA office, I said, how can I be involved? What can I do? They said, hey, come on out, or let's make some social content with the players. Let's see what you could do. And I just kept showing up, kept pushing kind of to keep doing more. As the league got some more, opportunities for broadcast opportunities, it was like, hey, Jeff's already here. He's already been covering our players. He's already connected with them. We can use Jeff because he's already connected with our audience. So that was just like, it was just grinding, pushing. And also it's about gaining the experience and the trust of people, I think, internally. You're not going to just go up to people and say, hey, can I work for you right now? Can I do this? Like, what can you prove? What can you show on paper? How can you add value? And I think that that's the important part, that important thing that I did, but also seeing the value of certain things developing. I see right now certain series of sporting events or alternative sporting events or opportunities on certain networks. Sometimes something I see developing and I go, I just don't think that's going to last, because I just don't think that's going to fit with the modern media. And then other places I go, I don't think people are realizing how big this is about to be. So I think you're always trying to, you have to be a student of the media to understand where certain media will be going.
First of all, you describing playing 2K with NBA players and taking questions, I'm like, sign me up. Like, sign me up right
awesome.
Now.
Awesome. I took it for granted. I look back and I'm like,
greatest job ever.
When you have great opportunities, don't take them for granted. Don't all of a sudden kind of, take your eye off the ball or start getting complacent. Not that I did, I had other things come up, but I wish I could still do it. Right. It was awesome.
And another follow-up to your last point, which I think is so interesting, because I feel like I'm old enough. Granted, I was like 9 or 10 when the time period you're talking about with the really rise of esports, where I remember like Super Smash Bros. Like really taking off in Mario Kart esports and all that. I wouldn't have thought at the time, and maybe because I was 10, I didn't know any better, but I wouldn't think that esports would still kind of be present. I still feel like the NBA 2K League is really present. I see a lot of it. Maybe not the official one. I just see a lot of these esport leagues still going on, and with Fortnite still being so big. But my question and my point is, are there any sports that you're seeing right now that you could see like taking that step and becoming something that's kind of massive in the media that you're talking about?
It's a good question. With esports, I'll start with the esports point. And the NBA 2K League has kind of reinvented itself. It sort of relaunched this year as a new, more casual sort of tournament-based league with kind of celebrities and NBA players involved than when I was doing it. It was totally professional gamers. I think that people got a little over their skis with esports because League of Legends and Overwatch League and certain and CSGO and certain video games early on could sell out arenas for their championships. And a game like Madden, even when I was younger, was huge from a sort of competitive, like ESPN had a show called, like, I forgot, it was called like Madden Nation or something, but they used to be on the Madden bus where it was like a reality show where they would play each other. And I remember guys would lose and get kicked off the bus. And I watched that as a kid. But what I think that they got a little too out in front of thinking that an entire circuit, an entire sort of season, like creating a 30 match season for localized teams. I think that they thought they could get fans and build audiences really quickly and really massive. And I think the appetite was more there for annual sort of events. The Olympics is great, but if there's a reason the figure skating world championships or the skiing world championships don't get the same publicity that the Olympics get every 4 years. It's just certain things kind of ramp up to annual or biannual or 4 years or whatever it may be. And you can't necessarily replicate selling out Madison Square Garden multiple nights a year for video games. It would take a long time to get there. And a lot of billionaire owners in multiple esports were hoping that would get there faster. So I know it's a long-winded way of saying esports is still there. People are going to still care about competing in terms of video games and seeing who's the best gamer of the year. It just might not be something that people will devote 30 to 40 nights of their year to watch. They might do one or two. And then the second question, you asked about emerging sports.
Yeah, if there was any you see on the horizon, because I'm curious to know.
I know pickleball has been something that people have been considering that maybe that would, because participation has grown so much. I still think there's an audience for professional pickleball. I think that because I think so many people play it, I think they need to innovate the live broadcasting a little bit more. It feels a little too close to tennis, and I think that it's needs to be a little faster, a little snappier, a little bit. It's also hard. There's so many segmented tours and leagues of pickleball right now. I think there needs to be one that sort of emerges and becomes the focal point of the sport. Lacrosse, PLL has kind of got there. We are having this conversation 3 to 5 years ago. I would have said what PLL has done, what Paul Rabel has done. I'm talking about lacrosse, which lacrosse was a sport that was not it was not centralized. And he basically said, the Rabel brothers basically said, we are going to make the best sport possible. And what they did was they built it slowly. They started with a touring league, then they went localized. Now they have so many media deals, and they're the biggest game in town for lacrosse. They, I think, were very smart in terms of thinking about building for longevity. Now, it's also because they care about the sport. Some people want to build sports or leagues so that they can sell them, and they're trying to build a product quickly and make a profit. I think that's a league that was built to last, and I think they've done a really incredible job building something that is going to have legs for years to come.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, I would never have thought that lacrosse would be something that is like talked about at like a general like family dinner or something like that, where like you're at family dinner and you got to go through all the major things, and then lacrosse is just snuck in there. It's interesting, you like at a Christmas party or whatever. Now, I do want to ask you about HQ trivia. I know we're backtracking a little bit.
It's all good.
But for some context, when I was a kid, I remember HQ trivia. And me and my friends would be like so hyped whenever that would happen. And we would always be like, we're going to win this time. And we were watching each other. We'd never get very far. We were not very smart. We're still not. We still probably could not win. But I'm curious to know what your experience was like with HQ Trivia and how you get involved with that. Because I feel like that is also, again, not to reuse the same word because I can't think of a better one, unorthodox. Like, I just feel like there's not many things like that, especially at the peak of its powers when it was like so like known. And so I'm curious to know like your experience there.
Well, so I mean, HQ's peak was really, I want to say 2018, 2019, which is before I was involved, which was, I mean, for those who may not even know, it was twice a day. It was a 10-question trivia show that everyone participated on an app on your phone. And if you could stay in for the entire 10 questions or 12 questions, you would get whatever the money was, you would split it with all your friends. And it was a phenomenon for like 6 months. It was, everyone played it every day. It was a big deal. You had celebrity guest hosts, all this stuff. I was there kind of at the end. It was kind of past that prime. COVID had started, and I was working with another partner, the Hall of Fantasy League, which was working with the Pro Football Hall of Fame to create a professional fantasy football league, kind of with the top fantasy football analysts. They would own teams, and you could buy stakes in their team for the year. And so they were partnering with HQ Trivia with sort of, it was the same sort of family of investors and individuals. And it was kind of, we thought it was a way in the fall before we were going to start the league to kind of get people to know what we were doing, and to create a sort of a game. A game around it. So I'm trying to remember if it was, I think it was, it was the fall before we were starting, that we started to do it. And so I had a little tryout, and it was probably halfway through the NFL season at that point. And I got in there, and all of a sudden I'm in the same studio basically that they'd been using when the game was at its height. And I've got a teleprompter, and I've got a camera, and I'm in like an office conference room basically, and I'm talking to the world. And not only am I talking to people, but there's no one there to laugh at anything I'm saying or give me reinforcement to what I'm saying. But it's COVID, so it's not like I'd had much interaction with anyone in a bit. So really cool experience to be a part of something that, like I'd been a fan of before. I think that I was really hoping that we were going to rekindle the flame, and I was going to be the new host of the regular trivia show and change the world. And it was a little hard to kind of, that spark wasn't going to fly the way that it had 2 years earlier. But it was still cool to not only be a part of that, but to, again, different experience. Trivia. I think trivia is massive right now on Instagram and TikTok. It wasn't really back then. So it was good, but it was good to kind of enter that realm and to understand what that took.
Listen, I know we're strapped for time, but I will say that it is a possibility that I was playing HQ Trivia as like a 13-year-old, and you were there saying jokes that nobody laughed at. Unfortunately, that's the unfortunate truth. I had two more questions for you. I know we're slightly running low on time here. First, I want to start with the PGA, working with that. It's kind of become your new identity on social media. Like, you're making lifestyle content about like what you want to improve on, which I thought was a really cool video, by the way, that TikTok that you made. And stuff like that. That's a really good idea. I got to steal that. But I'm curious to know like your experience with the PGA so far, and like how you've developed as like a broadcaster and doing all these things with the PGA.
Well, let me just start with, from a content perspective. It's funny because when I put out content about broadcast, right? Or when I put out content about my own broadcast experiences, the quantity of likes and engagement isn't that high. But the amount of messages that I get from people like yourself, from college kids, from aspiring broadcasters, is always massive. And I think it shows a little bit too of social media, how it's geared toward people who are hyper specific to kind of, want to reach out about that. But it's not going to hit the masses. So I think it's important to figure out kind of what you want to do on social media. And I want to do a little of both, because I enjoy having those conversations and watching other people's lifestyle content and learning so I can be better at my job. But then there's also this idea of like, how can you reach the most amount of people possible? So that's one interesting thing. The PGA Tour, calling golf, it's very different than calling other sports. I think that when you call basketball, you're calling on TV, not just radio. You're talking about every pass. You're talking about every shot. You're reacting. There's no dead time. In golf, the sport is built talk. As a player's about to hit, you got to be quiet. And sometimes the biggest part of the actual action, you're not saying anything. In the biggest moments when the crowd reacts, the last thing the viewer wants to hear is you talking. They want to hear that crowd reaction. It's a different sport in that sort of way, and I've had to learn that cadence the analysts in golf, the on-course walkers, are much more active in the play-by-play speak than color analysts in traditional team sports or sideline reporters in other sports. So when you're a play-by-play host in golf, it's a lot more. You have to back up in some of those big moments, which can be, you got to swallow your pride a little bit and kind of be humble. But then when you're going between shots, now you've got to carry the action. You've got to talk. So I've learned a lot working in golf. Like I said, earlier, it's a sport I'm very passionate about. It's a sport that I want to see growth in and that I'm excited about. Some people tell me that they can't watch golf. They're just not engaged with it. And that's all right. But for me, the idea of guys going toe to toe on Sunday, the strategy that they're employing, the looking up at the leaderboard, needing to hit the shot in the most critical moment, like that gets my juices going. And when I've done radio, I've had the opportunity to be on the course with some of those final groups in those critical moments in the arena where fans are right up against the ropes. And I mean, that's the exhilaration that I get.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I mean, you got me fired. No, you have me fired up now. Now I'm going to tune into every single PGA related thing I can from now on, just because you've kind of opened it in a new light for me. Now I want to ask you one final question. Again, I appreciate your time. If you could share any wisdom about your career so far with young broadcasters like myself on how to get involved and how to grow their skills, I'd appreciate that if you'd share some.
Oh man. A lot.
It's a loaded question. I know. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, first of all, like I said, you want to be a student of everything before you can be a master of it. And I think that studying media in terms of watching a sporting event, again, I'll talk from a play-by-play standpoint, watching a media event and saying a sporting event and saying, what would I call in this situation? What would I say? Here's what this broadcaster said. I like that. I was watching a golf broadcaster recently, a British golf broadcaster. His name is James Craig. I'll shout him out. He does some of the UK broadcasts of PGA Tour events, and he's weaving in every adjective, every way to say how a golfer hit a shot. The same way I think Doc Emmerich for hockey, which might be a little before your time now. Yeah. Doc Emmerich is one of my idols because he could say knifed along, buttered through, cut through, chipped ahead, every possible. He had a soundboard of different ways to say that a pass was made in hockey. So I'm looking at this guy and I'm listening to all the adjectives that he's describing a Rory McIlroy chip with a ton of backspin. It was a pitch shot that just spun back. And he's talking about marvelous, zip, blah, blah, whatever. And I'm thinking, okay, it's a different speak. Like the British call golf a little differently than Americans, but how can I say the same shot in a different way throughout the course of a day? And I think that that's where something that I just experienced still in my 30s that I'm doing. So when you're that's one of the biggest things that you can do, I think, is just put yourself in shoes and how would you call this sporting event? But also, like I was saying, read books by broadcasters, learn about their experience, listen to podcasts, watch YouTube clips, try to grasp how different people go about their preparation. I think like Adam Amin is a great broadcaster right now for Fox Sports and does the Bulls. And he posts videos on Instagram where he's talking about his preparation. He posts live Instagram sort of videos before Bulls games. And again, I'm speaking about myself, but I'm still learning. I'm watching those to try to learn, okay, well, how is he preparing? How is he different than me? What can I take away from this? So I think just learning how other people go about their craft and kind of what you're doing, it could be podcast interviews, but it could also be just reaching out to people, just saying, hey, I have a question here. Hey, I would love to chat on the phone. I think the biggest thing from a networking perspective is not asking people for jobs or asking for favors, but just asking, hey, I'm very interested in this. I'd love to get to know you. I'd love to pick your brain. I'd just like to learn, and creating relationships with people. I'll tell you, Steve Weissman is a broadcaster for Tennis Channel. He's done NFL Network. He was at ESPN before that. When I was a freshman at Northwestern, the first interview that I did for radio, we had a sportsathon, WNUR sportsathon, which was one weekend a year, sports got from Friday and Sunday for Saturday for like 30 hours. Sports controls the radio station, and we're just doing sports shows, but we're raising money for us to have a sports radio program. And we did like, so we could run these interviews. We all did like an interview, and I just happened to draw him. And for 15 minutes, I just talked to him on the phone, did a radio interview, and I followed up with him. And we've had a relationship. I met him in the field years later. He remembered me because I had followed up, and we go back and forth a little bit now. And I try to see him when he's in town for the US Open for tennis. And it's just been, having a relationship like that he was just the first one. So I go back to that, but building those relationships and learning from people is the best thing you could possibly do.
Jeff, thank you so much for your time. I mean, I'll definitely, that advice is seriously incredible. Quickly, do you have a book that you recommend specifically? Because I always ask broadcasters this because I'm always interested in picking up new books. I love reading. Well,
I'm looking right now at Kenny Albert's book, which I'm just starting, A Mic for All Seasons, which I think that Kenny Albert, what I want to learn really about from Kenny Albert's perspective is how he's able to do so many sports, because that's still where I do mostly golf, but I still want to cross the aisle and call other sports as well. And I think that as things have gotten really micro-targeted and specialized, it's been harder and harder to find ways to be able to do that. So that's just an area, like I said, I want to call the Olympics, I want to call other sports, I want to be able to do everything. So I want to know, how to go about how he's able to do that, because he's the only guy right now that essentially calls all 4 major sports, which is incredibly impressive.
Jeff, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And to all the listeners, all the watchers at home, I've been your host, Connor Lewis, signing off.